Hello and welcome to another WeAreDevelopers Live. We're here live again, and I just the new music that we just hit there. It sounds like a quack quack, doesn't it? Like the little horns.
It does.
So it's like that's perfect for our like branding thing. So it's all good. I'm Chris. I'm here with Danny, and today we're very lucky because we also have a guest on the show, which we're going to bring on, and we can quickly introduce himself if our stage crew is here. Stefan, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. How's life, people?
So for people who don't know you, shame on you, but can you quickly introduce yourself, what you're doing and how you're doing?
So I'm Stefan from Berlin. We met each other at plenty of times, Chris, at various conferences. So I do software development, primarily focusing on the front end. I blog a lot. Used to work in developer relations, and I also run a weekly newsletter for front-end developers. Overall, I'm all about the nerdy front-end stuff.
Nice. Nerdy front-end stuff is what we're all about. And yeah, I mean, I love your newsletter. I saw that basically the numbers are not as much as ours, but it's basically really interesting. And I felt like if I steal as much from yours, well, we find the same things, but you're doing a really good job in distilling it. So I thought, okay, let's bring him in. What I found interesting is that you actually don't care about the layout much, because we have a lot of readers that are on like very old like Outlooks and stuff. So basically the length of the email is a very important thing, but yours has white space really out there. So do you mostly see that people see it in the browser rather than in the email itself, or?
That's a tricky question. So far, nobody complained, actually. I think the email at this point got a little bit too long for certain people. So a lot of people also read it on my blog. And then there's also the folks that, of course, care about tracking links and all these kind of things. So they also usually go to the web to not participate in click and open in click statistics. So it's a mixed bag, but so far nobody complained. So I like white space. What shall I say, huh?
Yeah, and I mean, it's I guess reading it on. I don't know any newsletter that I read in my email client. I always go like open in browser anyways. So I think it's just a very normal thing. And when you look at the source code of the generated stuff that systems that are optimized for HTML email generate for you, you get these nostalgic feelings to 1996 or more like eye twitching. Like, why is this the way it is? But yeah, and then like just rolling this out as a browser version seems weird, because then you have like really old school HTML out there.
Yeah, for me, this is all I write it in Markdown, and my newsletter provider just does something with it. And so far, it seems to be all right.
Yeah, we got what you see is hopefully what you get editor for it. But like
that's a nice way to phrase it, yeah, for email.
So we got a lot of resources to go through again this week. Hopefully people will be excited about that. The URL is available. I will share that in a second. And then we can actually go through them and talk about what happened. So let me actually share a screen here. I got to do that on the other machine. Hang on. Or what's going on? Like, how do I share this now? Okay, cool. So we're doing that already. Fair enough. Cool. So because I'm using my laptop there, I mean, as you can see, like there's a few tabs open, like a few of those. But let's go to the other one where we don't have the tabs open and in the way. So the first thing that that everybody is pushing out right now, and I found about 12 different blog posts about it and videos about it, is DeepSeek. Have you heard of this, Stefan? And what's your thought on those?
To be very honest, I'm very late on all the AI topics because I think I'm a little bit skeptical there. So please enlighten me about DeepSeek when this was the hot news this week.
Well, what I know about it is that it crushes OpenAI with an MIT licensed model, and developers are losing it. That's basically what I read there. So, yeah, but basically, most of the others, no, don't show me ads. Most of the others are basically limited in their licensing, or the free version is limited to something else. And this is one that got announced a few months ago, and now it got completely MIT licensed and completely available for you to use offline and for you to use on your own machine. one issue with it is, well, I don't know if it's an issue because I don't want to be that person, but it's completely Chinese owned, the complete Chinese product. So I don't want to be prejudiced about it, but I'm like, where's my data going and what's it doing? And like, it's great that I can download it from there, but it feels whenever I see these things, I'm wondering where does the data come from? Where did they harvest it from? How it got it cleaned, and what it is. But I guess if none of us have a big opinion on it, Dan, what do you think about it? Have you used others offline or on your own and see this in comparison?
I haven't obviously used this yet. I think I'm sort of hesitant to get too excited about it because I think we see so much news around AI models, and there's always these kind of very sensationalist headlines around it's a game changer and all this. I think that it does though tap into something that's interesting around we saw the TikTok news, the potential banning in the US, and there was this whole debate and discussion around people using apps that may be located in China, and then they're in the West and they're worried about their data, but then they're signing up for Chinese apps that they know or suspect to actually be harvesting their data. And so there's sort of two sides. One side where people are concerned about the data, and other people that are saying, I don't really care as long as it gives me an interesting tool to use or something that's powerful. So that's my concern, that people see the headlines, take it on, and before you know it, if it does have, if there are concerning vulnerabilities associated with it, before you know it, everybody's using it anyway because they were so excited about the product.
Yeah, so I think my point is like, okay, if you want to have an all-inclusive, like has everything in it model, that might be a good option because it's licensing. But when I use something locally, I normally go deeper. I normally go like already a model that is on a certain topic or is actually weighted in a certain way, so I can use it for something sensible rather than just like, here's the world as an LLM on your machine. So I hope you all get excited about it. If you actually find something about it, comment, talk to us about it. And if you're an expert on it, come off the show next time. So maybe there's going to be something cool in there. A really quick one. Google begins requiring JavaScript in Google search. This is, I mean, it's not a surprise, but it's actually sad because whenever I talk about, and Stefan, you probably as well, whenever I talk about progressive enhancement and I talk about web development, I tell people like, okay, Google, you turn off everything, you will get a search box because that's their business model. And the search box does everything without JavaScript, without plugins, without anything. And that's now over. So I think we're past that time where Google was a search company first, but now
long time ago.
Yeah. So it's an interesting one because last week we had an expert here that talked about like how the SEO crawlers or the LLM crawlers don't understand JavaScript. That's why they get a lot less data than the ones that are basically in for Google itself or for Bing itself. So now we got that turnaround that now you cannot use Google without JavaScript. So probably that might be a thing that they actually did. Oh, I guess that, yeah, that was the reason. They didn't want Google results to be actually scraped by LLMs. But it feels relying on JavaScript is not the safest bet of doing that, right?
No, so for me, of course, I feel the same way as you, Chris, right? This kind of makes me cry, right? Because it's kind of breaking the entire story that we're trying to do on the web, right? Use the technology with the least power for the things that you do, and now this is kind of breaking. We need JavaScript for everything. So it kind of makes me want to cry. But regarding Googlebot not executing JavaScript, that is actually a myth, isn't it?
No, the AI bots don't.
The AI bots.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, that might make sense. But they are probably catching up very, very soon, aren't they? I mean, if Google search can do the entire JavaScript stuff, why shouldn't an AI bot do that?
Computation expense was the thing that people talked about. So it's basically, it costs a lot more to actually run a virtual browser to actually index a thing than to just run some regex over a text file.
Interesting that if computation is a thing for a company like OpenAI that burns so much money for well, okay, if a headless browser is not in that budget, then it is how it is, I guess.
Yeah. Which brings us to the next one, which I found pretty an interesting statement where it says like back to text how AI might reverse web design. And his point is like, I'm instead of clicking through a website and actually getting lots of pop-ups and lots of like, please sign up and do these kind of things, which ironically just showed up on his article. He said like, okay, I'm going to use a text, I'm going to use an AI agent and do the surfing for me and do all the things for me. So the whole idea of design of the web is unnecessary, because in the end what we need is just text results that get sent back to you through a chat interface or an agent sending you an email that it's done its job. Are we there already, or is this just, it feels to me like this is an interaction model that we try to force feed people right now, but I myself don't, I mean, I hate clicking through websites that don't give me the content that I want. But at the same time, sending an agent out and getting one result back, I still don't trust it. What do you say?
Go for it, Dan, or shall I?
I mean, no, after you. Go for it.
So I already told you that I'm kind of a skeptic, and right now we're in the era or in the time where everybody's shoving agents at us, right? I mean, Gmail just enabled AI features this week, last week. I now have just a little box that I won't use. The same for Notion or other products. Right now, I think we're in the time where we kind of figure out what actually want. But in my opinion, it's a little bit too drastic. But going for the future, maybe we will have these chat conversations for things like booking in a flight or something. That might make sense. But I also feel like that in my community, there's right now a little bit. And maybe it's just a niche thing, but I feel like that there's a counter push against that, so that there are certain areas in the web that are now getting more individual, right? Not like the common Medium article page, or that people get more creative, because we are kind of whitewashing the internet right now, right? And if it's now becoming chat conversation and AI bots all over the place, kind of, it looks all the same. It's all the same functionality, and we all ask a random LLM to kind of give us something. So where's the internet where's the internet heading here right now? And I feel like maybe it's a small bubble, maybe it's only my bubble, but I feel like the creativity with people doing cool stuff on the web with actual web design is happening, and I don't think it will disappear completely. But let's see how the AI stuff plays out.
Yeah, I remember there was a counter movement some time ago. I remember when the big CSS frameworks came out, and every website looked the same with like 3 columns and a big button and a header. And then like design bloggers basically made a different design for every article that they've written. I think that was too much in the other direction. But it's interesting to see that there's always a counter movement going there. But then I'm worried that counter movement doesn't grow. It's been the same 50 people complaining about it since 2003. So I mean, if anything, we need to actually think about web design and who's actually controlling it. Because I think designers have lost control a long time ago. It was basically then covered with like lots of click to action and like here's a chatbot on the side. So it feels like we're in a post-design web design world. What do you think, Dan?
I don't know if it's ever going to go away though, right? I think we don't just we don't just use a car because of its function and we don't care about its style. You know, I know that might be a strange analogy, but we do use products for sort of form and function. And I think that the idea that we're going to just all be using sort of AI bots to book our holidays, I think that takes away some of the experience that people have of actually doing that thing. You know, the UI does add something to that experience. It's not just sort of a vehicle to carry the data from one place to another, even though some people might look at it like that. I think the other thing that came to mind, and I think I sent you a link on this, Chris, is about, you know, if you look at a lot of Japanese web design in particular, and you'll see that it's websites can be very, very dense, and they can be completely sort of functional as the priority, and that they will look very different than many Western websites where you might see sort of minimalist design and trying to give lots of white space, as we said at the start. So I think I'd be interested to see sort of what the impact of this is. Do Japanese websites or maybe Asian websites that are more functional in their design, do they then get indexed, you know, with priority by the bots, or how does that all work? Just because they're in effect very dense in terms of like the keywords they use, or, you know, and you can see the design can look really, really awful sometimes. It really challenges that whole debate of like, does the design actually enable the functionality? Do they actually interact? But yeah, I just think it's an extreme argument to say that everything will be done just through chatbots with no UIs. I don't see it happening.
Yeah,
I found it interesting because Asian design, like, I mean, when I worked on Yahoo Korea and Yahoo China, I was like, how can you use this? But this seems to be a thing. So what do you think, Stefan, that like, have you looked at this, like what the world did, how we're in the world we do different things? Or maybe this is something we should do more at design conferences, invite people to talk about those things.
Oh, I'm super interested in these different localization things and design things, right? There are many differences, right? There's also like, I think this is super fascinating, right? And it's not only design, it's also what emojis mean what in what side of the world, right? For example, this is pretty cool in the US. It is not in Australia, as I've learned recently. And these kind of things are super fascinating, but I really like Dan's take here, form and function, right? The question is, what do we want to replace, right? And it doesn't matter if it's design or functionality of a certain interface, right? Certain interfaces are pretty great, like my weather app on my phone. I don't need to talk to a robot to see that today it's cold outside. That's just not a thing, right? Maybe booking flights is a thing, but I don't think that design and UIs will go completely, but right now we're kind of figuring out where we want to go with it. And to be very fair, I don't think that we three will decide this, because we three are tech nerds. It will be all the average people out there that start understanding if this bot thing makes sense or not. And then we have to see what the majority thinks.
Yeah, I love that when you talked about the weather. I love that vanillaweather.com, which just is the weather and no like pop-ups and these kind of things, not like the Kachelmann app or these kind of things that people use. And I mean, I like the Google one with the little bit of frog and the rain on it, so that's pretty cute. But when it comes to different web designs, this always fascinated me as well. There is the biggest newspaper in Norway is called vg.no, so really cool short domain. And look at this. This feels like a CSS has not loaded.
Yeah.
And this has been the same since 1995, 1996. And I talked to them. They don't want to talk much about it, but they said like it really works.
Yeah.
And this just fascinated me every single time I saw this.
It almost makes me think of, you know, that sort of neo-brutalist trend that's gone around the last few years. I think I actually noticed on the buffer.com homepage, for example. So if anyone wants to see an example, that very flat, quite aggressive, almost ugly, because it's about just prioritizing function and the form doesn't matter. The design is kind of irrelevant. They've sort of gone for it there, you know, this very flat effect that you see. It's not really the best example, but sort of quite simple elements. There's not gradients. There's not a huge amount in terms of kind of detail. It's usually just sort of very big and blocky design. It almost makes me think of that when you were showing that one before. If you bring up that last tab, Chris, sorry, I know it's gone. Yeah, this idea that you purely prioritize the text that someone needs to see, to read, to understand the article, and that the image it almost looks like it's just they fit the image in wherever they had space.
I mean, how's Craigslist doing these days? Craigslist was always this example of we don't care about design and it just works, right? And even though I'm not a big Hacker user, but Hacker News is the perfect example for these kind of things.
Craigslist still stays the same, and I mean he's interviewing, talking to him, and I saw an interview with him the other day, what he does with his money and how much, and it feels like what we chatted offline about earlier, like that, like happy sizing. He's like, it works. I basically I don't want to put more things in there, and it feels like it's intense, but it really does the job. So I think there is a fascinating moment where these things are built for, like, changing it would probably be like a big thing. People would complain about it when you do that. So
I mean, people complain always, right, when you change something, but
Yeah.
changing designs and making functionality harder, regardless of what it is, I think people complain more than just adding some colors or something. If you're good at what you're doing and you change this with an LLM interaction, I'm not sure if that's a reasonable thing to do.
Well, another thing that I found interesting was like how we used LLMs to produce instructions for LLMs to build Encore applications. I'm not quite sure what they were on about there. So basically, but when it comes to like designing tools for developers, means designing tools for LLMs, I found that as a developer, when I worked on developer tools, it's really tricky to innovate. It's really hard to actually change something that millions of people use every day to build other things. Like shifting a button around is just making people nuts. So it will be interesting to see what how that works, like the tools to build things with, if that changes into a more interactive state as well. I mean, I've never trusted the what you see is what you get editor. And like anything that is like dragging things around and snapping them into place, I know it's going to be horrible code, but that might be just because I shouldn't do this job anymore. Like, how about you, Dan? Are you more of a what you see is what you get person? Do you trust that kind of stuff?
No, I've had experiences over the years, like all of us, with whether it's WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, all these kinds of things where they've always had editor problems, and they would quite often I would find things like WordPress for me used to break, where I would use maybe a plugin editor and then the editor needs updates, and so then the entire editor is broken. And no, I don't like it. I like to go for Markdown wherever I can, because it just feels like it makes more sense to me. But going on to this article, actually, there was one point I wanted to sort of just bring out, because I think it kind of hits on the essence of it, where there's 3 bullet points where they say our simple but effective solution. And it was just this idea about how they really, I would say that the summary point is about how they're trying to think like an LLM. And so they're creating practices that are designed for the LLM primarily, rather than the team. And so the team then are having to sort of work in service of the LLM. So they've got things there like rewriting documentation. And Stefan, you said about changing something, can be a real headache, and it can kind of, break things. It looks like they're sort of trying to think, almost go back one step. If we're all going to be using LLMs when we're programming, then it needs to be trained on the right information. And to do that, we need to make sure our documentation can be easily indexed and read by the AI. So it's an interesting point, at least. Do we just try and use documentation we've got at the moment, try and make it fit into LLMs and hope that they can work with it, or can that be enhanced by changing the documentation so it's in a language they understand? Which I thought was an interesting point.
Yeah, I mean, you can drastically improve the results, right? I played with this, so cursor rules or Copilot instructions or whatever you call it, right? If you really adopt, or if you really have a team across that use the same LLM, that makes so much sense, right? Just generate your cursor rules by just with a build script, right? And generate some stuff to feed it with every LLM call. And this makes the output so much better. This is something, I mean, we're still all kind of, or at least I am kind of learning how this whole thing should fit into my development workflow, right? I really force myself to have, for example, Copilot chat all open, because I'm so hesitant and so skeptical. But when you kind of provide cursor rules or Copilot instructions, and you kind of figure out how you have to use these kind of things. Well, I'm still a skeptic, but I do recognize more cases where this shines.
Oh, Chris has gone quiet. I don't know what's happened there, Chris. You've unmuted, but
no
we can't
sound.
hear you. So we've got Vince on it in the background. We'll keep the. We've also got instruments, Stefan. So if we need to, we will have to get the guitars out. Okay, I think we usually give it to
Let's go. But what about you, Dan? Are you big on the LLM coding?
I am, but purely out of curiosity. I think that I've always been a fan of, I almost put it into the category of things like it's an accessible technology, or it's something that can enable you to do something that maybe is at the limits of kind of what you understand or what you know. Obviously, there's dangers with that, working with things you don't really fully understand. But I've always been a fan of that. If we map it onto an instrument, actually, I started playing guitar when I was young, and I would play songs that I couldn't really play, and I would just have a go, and they were too fast for me. But I think that helps you improve more quickly, because you can kind of see what the next step is. And I sort of see the same thing with AI, where it shouldn't be writing all of your code. It shouldn't just be that you're, I think at the moment anyway, that you're just describing things to you and it's giving you huge chunks of code and you're accepting it and moving on. You can build things like that. I just don't think that's good for you, like long term, to actually understand what you're looking at. I mean,
100% agree. I mean, this is what always sets you apart, right? If you question whatever is written on Stack Overflow, or if what you copy and paste from somewhere, it doesn't matter where you have it, right? If you question it, you will always be better off than just, okay, works, let's move on.
No, definitely, and I think that it's interesting because we have actually got a link coming up in a minute which sort of taps into this, and I was thinking about it a lot last night because one of the news stories, and I know Chris, we're really asking Chris to multitask here, fixing microphones and clicking links, but the English will become the most popular development language in 6 years. I thought that was a really interesting one. We'll just see if we can.
It is not right now. What is the most?
Yeah,
You mean in context?
Yeah. And I, what do you think about that? Aside from it being English, let's ignore that. I am English, right? So maybe it's gonna, or I'm British. You know, it might. I'm probably biased, but ignore the actual language. We can talk about that. But what about the idea of it just being like they're saying here, that everything is just natural language? There's almost no need for technical language at that point. Is that a good or a bad thing?
That is a very interesting statement. So let me just ramble along because that I haven't thought about that much yet. So I do think that natural language might kick off, but no, I'm too much of a, no. Okay. I would say people use LLMs, people kind of program maybe in natural language. But for anything complicated, you still have to write code, or you still have to use code, or you have to debug things. In my experience, the things that I get for things that are not answered 10,000 times on Stack Overflow, I have to write actual source code and understand what is going on. So maybe not, but what's your take?
I mean, I had this example on the weekend, actually. I sort of posted about it on X where, you know, I'm like a lot of people. I sort of have watched Stack Overflow struggle to adapt and find myself going on it like sort of less and less. And then I got into this sort of frustrated loop with the LLM where it was kind of telling me it was right. I knew it was wrong. I was telling it what to correct, and it was giving me the same code that it had given me the first time, telling me it's correct and acting as if it was the first time it had given me it. And I ended up, you know, it felt like I was stepping back in time because I went on to search and I searched for it and I found this, you know, like usually it's a thread, isn't it, on Stack Overflow from 5 years ago. And the correct answer is not always the one that's actually been accepted as the correct answer. But I found it and it made me think, do you know what, there's aside from the understanding of the LLM and it actually figuring out that it was wrong, that was a separate point. The search terms and the way I searched for it to find that very specific thing on Stack Overflow, it felt like I found a little corner of the internet that the LLMs don't really care about because it's not it's out of the average. Do you see what I'm saying? That they go for the common repeatable things, it seems like, and that might just start with like documentation for Next.js, which was where it seemed to be finding a lot of the information it was giving me, whereas this Stack Overflow post wasn't interesting to it. So I'm not sure. I think, what do you feel about the idea of this sort of post-code world? Because this is what this is tapping into, right? The world when are we holding on to the idea that we actually need to write code?
Well, again, it's us writing code for a living, right? Of course, we're holding on to it, and I will hold on to it until I'm proven otherwise. So far, this hasn't happened. But actually, on the same topic, I read a blog post yesterday, that was like, use the AI stuff if you want to feed it stuff and make it shorter, or condense stuff, or change stuff with the same amount of length, something like that, for manipulation and summaries. And that's what it's great for. And I think that was a very interesting take, because these are exactly these scenarios that I can say, this works great. If I maybe want to even refactor some code or something, this is cool. But I cannot just, in my experience at least, I cannot just go into a English code editor and say, build me this, and start from zero and get tremendously more output than I put in, because that usually doesn't work. So I'm skeptical about the English take, but ask me again in 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, I was interested in it, just seeing, you know, we obviously know English being the sort of, you know, dominant language used in business and things like this, but I'm not sure, because I wonder if there's something that you might lose from only being able to communicate in that language, if that's the case. You know, I was sort of wasn't sure, and I know we'll move on, but I wasn't sure if it was more a point about natural language being the sort of the thing that we use in the future, or specifically being English because of this sort of dominant language. But
I mean, there's also maybe another take on this, which is just efficiency, right? Natural language is pretty verbose. I can write a loop and some functions very, very quickly. If I have to put these in natural language, because to be fair, again, in my experience, to kind of get good source code, I have to write an essay, right? It's like, yeah, I need this, and it has to work with this and this and this and this. And very often I was like, oh, I don't, but maybe I'm also not trained enough or not skilled enough to really quickly type that out, right? But defining 5 functions and gluing them together is not a lot of work for me. Coming up with a good prompt might take a little bit.
That is a really good point. You know, I think there's something to be said about how we think. And yeah, perhaps that actually writing something in code, it can more closely sort of relate to how you thought about that thing rather than having to put it into an essay. That's a really interesting point. We'll move on because there was, and I know Chris is in the background trying to fix sound issues, etc. But we'll move on just to the next one. We've got about the accessibility essentials. Every front end.
I think it should be available again. Can you hear me?
Ah, hey.
Yay. Cool. So I'm now using 2 laptops for different things. So I just realized that taking cables out while you're doing things, not a good idea. Okay, cool. So this is this one now. So fair enough. Okay, so next one that we're going through. I heard the discussion. I pointed out as well. I mean, Dion is basically a guy I know for years. He's worked on like Chrome. He worked on all different kind of Mozilla things as well. So I think the idea of him is like it's going to be talking to your computer first to build code. And English is basically the simplest language, or him being British, or people just think in English. That's about it, basically it. So, but yeah, you're right. Like I think generating things from it may be a nice dream, but okay, let's see what's going on. Accessibility user requirements for W3C group has now been ratified as a node, so that's interesting as well, because we finally have like a standard what it means to do developer tools and how accessible they have to be. That is actually a niche need as well. But when I worked on the dev tools for Edge, for example, it was amazing how much stuff we had to do to actually make things available for every user out there. And we made them better by making it for every user out there. But it feels like people are always wondering, like, will there be blind developers out there? And yes, there are many out there as well. And I think what kind of I often find that when we make things accessible, they get better for everybody else. What are examples where you saw that, like where we use an accessibility feature that is not needed for you, but actually makes your life easier?
Touch targets, colors. So grayscale interfaces. I can see color. I'm always annoyed when I don't see what a link is and what I can click. A lot of websites have this. For example, a lot of websites wouldn't underline these links. This is a normal accessibility feature, helps me because my phone turns into grayscale from 8 p.m. onwards. And very often I'm like, okay, here's a link. Now I have to turn on color. This annoys the hell out of me. Touch interfaces for accessibility reasons. We have all these kind of minimum target size, right? So that a button is big enough, that a link or 2 links aren't close enough. Tapping the right thing affects me. What else? Web performance. I consider that as accessibility feature all the time too. Deutsche Bahn. When a website is slow, that's not going to fly in the German train system. So I 100% agree, Chris. Thinking of more people makes a product better, and very quickly when you look out for these things, you will figure out or discover that, yeah, it's better for me too.
Well, trains don't fly by design, but like that's basically, I mean, in Germany, we're happy when they run. But yeah, what I find interesting is that also ties into a thing I'm going to put in the newsletter, that like a lot of times you want anything to work on macOS nowadays as an app developer, you have to go through the accessibility interface, because it's the only thing that gives you access to different parts of the operating system, because they can never block that. So that's an interesting part where it comes there. Now, there's an accessibility essentials article that went around, and I haven't looked at it myself, but people got really, really excited about it. That basically points out about the basics of accessibility again. Dan, you probably took a closer look to that one, right?
Yeah, I actually love this, to be honest, because I think that it's a bit like a cheat sheet. You know, I found when I was learning sort of software for the first time, there might be something like Photoshop. I would get these cheat sheets and they'd have all the shortcuts, and I always found those really useful because it was like something I could refer to just make sure I wasn't missing anything that I was doing a lot. And I see that a little bit like this, where these are, some of them are so basic and so obvious, but I think that you need to be reminded of them if you don't encounter them, for yourself. If they're not issues that you regularly come across, or things that are there but you don't even experience them, then you're very easily going to forget about them. So yeah, I love this. I think it's always good to have these cheat sheets. Really useful.
Cool.
Yep.
I mean, there's a few out there. Like there's also Hayden Pickering just did one for like non-techie people. That was interesting to see. But I mean, it always pains me to see how many people just don't know about these basics, or just don't care. And oftentimes when you go to social media and you try to add an alternative text, it's like a 5-click thing. I wrote about this a few weeks ago, where it's like, wouldn't it be great if we just, as part of a post, we could just say like a bracket alt : and write the alternative text there, rather than having to click through like 15 things of the interface to make it a meta, or like a front meta thing in Markdown. But it seems tricky that people don't want to add this. And I guess if you allow people to add some extra text, spammers will use it for all kind of crap.
I mean, this is a conversation that I have very often, that people don't necessarily care. It slightly goes to the point we had earlier, Dan. It's like, if you consider what you do in terms of, it could be publishing or it could be software development, right? If you consider it kind of as a craft and you want to do good stuff in general, let it be posting on social media with an alt text, or building software or for the web or something. If you're the person that kind of digs deeper, wants to do good stuff, and doesn't only copy and paste from Stack Overflow, you will care about these things eventually. You will learn about them, because it's, I would say at this point, very hard to not at some point come across semantic HTML or keyword navigation. When you do front end, at some point you will come across this. But some people don't want to master the craft, and that is a thing for sure.
I wonder on that.
I mean, there's all these Cinderella stories about the developer that used LLMs to generate the app and made millions of dollars. So
sure,
maybe us selling like you need to know the basics is not a thing that's interesting for people that just want to go onto the market to make money.
Yeah, or maybe just have a day job and that's it, and nobody cares. Maybe it's also an internal application, right? Or a tool just for them. There might be some reasons. I consider front end to be a craft, though, and we're paid to do good stuff, right? Should look good, feel good, have a nice UX,
and basically not look the same everywhere. That's the dream that people always try to go for, and it was never a thing. It was always a lie. Interesting one as well. Don't force dark mode, where people were basically, he's talking about like that dark mode is super annoying, and there's accessibility problems with it, and there's accessibility guidelines for it. And I find that interesting, because everybody I know who's like a half knowledge person about accessibility tells you that dark mode is so much better for people because it doesn't strain your eyes.
I have something to say on this, though, because I think it's talking about things in absolutes and extremes. Everybody says, because I love dark mode, I will put it on for anything. Okay. I don't have any visual impairments, though, so I'm making that decision based on purely which one I think looks better. But the amount of times that I see like a jet black, 6 zeros hex code being used, I think it might even be on the Vercel homepage. I think that's their brand, which you think is kind of the home of Next.js. So then it inspires so much of that design. But the amount of times that I see that, where somebody has taken that idea of dark mode being more accessible and gone to the extreme. And I love this article because they show you what this person experiences. They show you the before and after. They've done some banding on one of the images, and I had no idea that was a result for some people for dark mode. So that's a great article. It proves the point. It really gets you thinking. Just no 6 zeros, please.
I really want to, especially you only need 3. The CSS parser does the rest for you. The thing that annoys me about it is how many people think that dark mode is actually an accessibility feature, and that it's basically something that people need. It is to a degree a choice that people have, but the real accessibility feature is actually the high contrast mode. And people who actually don't use that at all, like that they don't understand that you need to write your CSS to support that as well, with like OS given names for colors rather than colors that you define yourself. And that's like 8% of Windows users need that thing. And that means background images are gone. Every link will always be yellow. The text will always be black. And that's basically people need this and can turn the whole operating system into this mode. But people get super excited about dark and light mode. And even more annoying when people just basically go for dark and light mode switchers, which is already in your operating system. Now, Stefan, I guess you have a different opinion on that. I mean, you had a lot of posts about dark light CSS, but do you think people should build switchers, or should we just take what the operating system does and show up?
That is a pet peeve topic of mine. So I think every browser should have. So I'm annoyed by. So first sentence first, accessibility is never done, and nothing is 100% accessible. And I think that is something that you have to keep in mind, right? You can write the same article for please don't force light mode. Same thing. That's my websites are usually in light mode. I hear the same thing. Nothing is always accessible for all the people. That's just the thing. When it comes to these color kind of things, operating system is fine, I guess, but operating system is not per site. What I'm actually dreaming of is that browsers would actually ship something that is kind of like reader mode config on a per site basis. We have that a little bit, that the browser remembers when you zoom in or you increase the font size on a per page basis with Command plus and Command minus, but you kind of flip the dark mode or do more things. So I would love to have an interface on an origin basis that allows me to kind of control color, control font sizes, control motion, maybe, right? Probably, I don't want to turn on motion on all the sites, but some sites are just going wild, right? So I just want to turn it off for these kind of things. So I think there's an opportunity for browsers to have this kind of control center or widget on a per origin basis, and this is how I would see it. Until then, if someone puts my dark mode choice or light mode choice into local storage and gives me a widget, I think I'm good with that.
I always loved the ones like back in the days when Internet Explorer 6 didn't resize fonts that were pixel based, and people built their own pixel resizing thing. And then they basically made divs that are not keyboard accessible. Yeah. So they built an extra accessibility feature that was not available. And it was just cracking me up. This is just a very interesting way of putting extra features in. And it gave accessibility a bad reputation because it meant like, oh, we put all this effort in building this and then it wasn't good enough either. And you're like, yeah, because you built crap. That's a difference. But like, it was interesting to see that is still, I see dark and light mode switches that are not keyboard accessible as well. So that's really not something that people should be doing. And yeah, I mean, dark mode is great because light attracts bugs, so basically always use dark mode. There's 2 articles that you can read on your own time, which is testing accessibility with screen readers and getting started with VoiceOver on Mac and NVDA. I love that operating systems have their screen readers now, and that when you install a new operating system, it actually asks you if you can see or not, and actually you can install macOS and Windows without actually seeing it. So that's pretty amazing. The only problem is that VoiceOver and Narrator on Windows is basically the least used screen readers out there. So when you get used to them as a developer, then basically your end users will either go for JAWS or NVDA. So I'm not sure. I mean, it's great to get a developer to use a screen reader to basically get them some idea of what it feels like to do it. But it's a specialist instrument. It's for experts that need it. So you as a developer can spend years and years trying to understand it, or basically just partner with somebody who needs it as a tester to do it. So for a first impression, it's great. But I think it's really dangerous to tell people that every developer needs to know screen readers. What's your ideas on that?
I mean, that is a very delicate and complicated topic, right? So I do agree that I would say that a basic knowledge of how a screen reader is used on any platform or on your platform, I think is a good thing, just to understand how this thing is used, right? People don't tap all the time. They can navigate the web in a different way. This is good knowledge to have. But I 100% agree with you, Chris, that is kind of maybe a profession on its own, right? Because it's not only like a skill set, how to navigate something with NVDA or VoiceOver or something. It's also this it has a technical side to it, right? So for example, I very often read the blog post from Adrian Roselli. And this is wild because screen readers, browser combinations, versions, all the things that we do with the browser combination with web platform capabilities, we just have another layer of this. Which screen reader with which browser on which version supports what, and what kind of experience give that for some users. I would never say this is 100% tested in all the screen readers, because this is a hell of a job. And I'm not pretending that I can say, hey, this is 100% accessible, because what Adrian does there and what all the great accessibility folks do out there when they do audits and all these kind of things, I think it's a profession on its own. And it's massive, for sure. User testing is another thing that you should do, probably. If you have some people that have screen reader knowledge, just let them play around with it.
Yeah, I was thinking about getting Marco Zee and a few other blind developers that I worked with in the past on the show. I wonder if that makes more sense to do it as an audio show as well. But like, it's fascinating to see how fast people listen to things that you could never do yourself as a sighted person. And it always cracks me up when people test screen readers and look at the screen at the same time, and you're like, this is not the idea. This is exactly not how to do it. So there's two things: dang it Git and oh shit Git. Oh shit Git you talked about in your latest thing as well, and that basically it tells you like when something went wrong with Git, and oh shit Git does the same thing. Oh, that's the same article. What the hell?
It's the nicer language version of oh shit.
Okay. Okay. Because
some people might have been offended by all the curse words in the first one or in the second one.
Oh yeah, there was also a shell command called the fornicate. Is that the right word? Basically shorter. Basically, when you type something wrong, you could type that one, and it would tell you what you did wrong. And I guess this is the similar kind of approach that basically explains the last Git command to you. This is great. I mean, when you use GitHub, when you use Git, do you do everything on the terminal, or do you use the integration in your IDE?
I'm a command line person.
Dan?
I'm a combination. Sometimes I'm the what do they call it? GitHub desktop as well, when I'm purely just not wanting to write anything. So yeah, I've definitely made some big mistakes though. Learning it as well, I find it really hard to learn, as in to find, you would just sort of knowing what you wanted to do, and then you would Google the command and you would try it, and then you would find out you'd left a flag on there, and so you'd got more than you wanted or whatever. There were always, I found it very, very tricky to kind of first learn. So again, this kind of shortcut based cheat sheet is great, because I think everyone's got themselves in trouble like that at one point.
Yeah,
I mean,
VS Code now has Copilot in the terminal as well. So if you're using the terminal with inside VS Code, you can use Command I and actually ask it to explain the Git commands to you as a chat inside the terminal itself. So I found that pretty cool.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just had a situation today. I feel like some people at some point really master it, but I forget all this stuff all the time, right? I just had a situation today in the morning, and I'm working on two branches, right? Main, staging, and prod, right? And I had something, and I wanted to release the entire chain, but I had something merged already. And I was like, no, I'm not reverting a commit now, and I have to kind of do the Git hassle, because I've never, after 10 or 12 years, I've never reached the point of, okay, I can just figure it out now. Let's do the Git manuals and reset hard, soft, whatever, tilde -1. I was like, nope. I just commented everything out as a YOLO commit, and let's move forward. I'm always impressed when people kind of master or kind of really get into the Git stuff. But
yeah, merging properly is also a skill that I will never master. The amount of times I just delete the local file and then pull it again and put it into an undefined .text kind of thing to cache it. It's sad, but I think there is there's a lady who does only Git command blocks, and I had a few times in the newsletter. We should probably get her on the show. So she does a really good job explaining the things. But it feels like this knowledge that you need at that time, and then you forget it again because you can look it up all the time.
Yeah, 100%.
Like FFmpeg commands or these kind of things. You're like, yeah, I don't need to know that. I remember
Webpack is the worst. Oh my god, no way to remember these.
I remember people that had like the VI commands as tattoos and stuff, so on their arms. So that might be something that we need to do with Git as well. Get like branching out. Let's do some quick ones because we have not much time left. So just a few things to show. There's color find, which Dan, you were excited about, right? That's basically
Completely addicted to it. Yeah, it's so addictive. It really is. It's a color acuity test. So you just put your name in and then it's going to show you a series of blocks, a bit like the sort of GitHub commit graph. And then you just find the odd one out basically. And it gets harder and harder. So you can see it gets closer and closer to the other colors. I mean, yeah, it gets really difficult. I think I got to level 28. So if anyone wants to beat that, go for it.
28? I made it to 22, dude.
Well, there we go.
And we were two people trying.
I'm a bit skeptical about those ones at the top, though. There's a lot of people with kanji that have got thousands of levels. I'm a bit skeptical about those.
Yeah.
I guess the REST API wasn't protected properly, so we could do a live code hack on that, but we don't have time. Software engineer pay heat map. I really like that one. That was available only for the US, but now we have it for Europe as well. So you can basically see which countries have the average salary and which companies pay the most in these countries. That I found interesting as well. I didn't know that Lyft was in Belarus. Because, I mean, it's not even in Europe. It's basically only available in America. But yeah, that was
the 10th percentile, Chris. If you just click that in the top right-hand corner, there's one interesting thing I'll just sort of bring your attention to, because you could obviously filter if you go to 10th percentile, and then if you go to 90, so you can see it kind of gets progressively lighter on the east. If you go to the 90th percentile, it gets progressively lighter, except for, I believe it's Bulgaria, where it's as dark and as dense as kind of German and Germany, UK, France. And as you can see, that means that they have, at the same time as having the lowest starting salary, they will have a large number of people on that very high salary, which is 130,000 euros ish, which puts it, I believe, in line with the top paying jobs in the 10% in the UK as well, and France and Germany. They're all around the same area. So I looked into that a little bit, and it seems like Bulgaria has been making a push to do IT outsourcing. They've been changing tax laws to make it very attractive for people to go there. And so that's potentially a little hub in the east that we're seeing, that where people are getting very high paid jobs compared to the rest of the region. So just thought that was interesting.
Interesting. I was invited to a conference in Kazakhstan the other day, and I never knew there was actually something there, and I wouldn't know how to get. But it was interesting to see. Bulgaria is interesting because it got beaches, so it's actually a really beautiful place as well. But that's a really interesting find.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that OpenStreetMap gives you these SVG maps, so you can actually build these things rather easily. So we're thinking, and I'm still working on that, to do a Code 100 challenge where we're going to release our data from our job board, and you can build visualizations with it. And the winners would come to the to our World Congress and can show it to people there and stuff. So that's something that I'm working on. So doing the whole like Open Hack Day kind of thing again. Squish is something you talked about, Stefan, right?
Yeah, drop in a ton of images, optimize them, and download them again. Super handy.
It's Adios Mani build. I think it uses the same API as Squoosh under the hood. And
yeah, some WASM magic is going on here. So,
and I think we should stop naming things that way. I remember when Smush It was the first one we built in Yahoo back then. It was like Stoyan Stevanov and Nicole Sullivan. And it was basically Smush It. It was like, okay, upload an image and then get a zip file with all the images that you optimized. And the first question was, people, what's a SMOO? So it was like smoosh it. And I think trying to be too clever with those things makes no sense to me. I use ImageOptim as an app, and that one was I can't remember who did it, but it was basically one of those Blogger types as well. And that's just drag and drop it on your own machine. And then what I like about it is changes the file on device, so it doesn't actually need you to have a copy of it. It just drag the thing in and it becomes smaller, and that's it. So
does it support the newer formats like AVIF and WebP, or is it just optimizing?
I think so. Yeah, I'm not sure, but it might be. It's open source. You can actually look it up on GitHub as well. You can deobfuscate JavaScript using LLMs. We had that in the past, so that's not a new thing as well. Yeah, two fun things. Somebody actually had a printer that showed like recipes, and they didn't lock it, so somebody sent the whole script of the Shrek movie there to print it out. So basically, if you do printers, please set a limit on things. And there was this marriage proposal spoken entirely in office jargon, and that's also absolutely hilarious the longer you read through that one. There's also an Austrian comedy that I just saw on YouTube, a few of those, and they're called how do I put this? How to Talk Like a Wanker is the title of it, and with a proper Australian accent. So it actually analyzes language in the office and basically teaches you what not to do. So that's a really interesting little resource as well. Now, I think the last thing we quickly want to talk about, which we kind of invited you to, is about, do I need this code dependency thing? So what was that about?
Well, the JavaScript runtime war is on, right? So we started with Node.js, and we now have Dino for sure running, and Bun is in the making. There's also some Gecko things, I think. And the competition is on, and Node.js is catching up. And we all know, so I'm very fascinated and excited about these kind of things, because Node.js is kind of progressing very fast, and I think a lot of people don't recognize it, because it's all due to the competition to catch up with Dino and all the others. And when you scroll down, there's a nice little table. So it's just to tell to the people, hey, check out what Node can do, and maybe you don't need to install the entire ecosystem from NPM. So testing is included, watching is included, parsing is included. So whenever you use Node.js, so there are a lot of things that we usually installed a lot of dependencies for. So when you're on a recent Node version, check out what is coming out of the box with Node. Pretty cool. And for the TypeScripters, since last week, TypeScript running at least, not compiling, but stripping codes is available in the newest cutting edge Node.js version. And
Bun has a server now since for 2 days or something like that as well. So you have like basically a renderer, bun.render actually gives you like the much like in the past browserify did you use for you kind of thing, a bundler built into the system itself. Yeah. This is fascinating because I remember the same with browsers. With browsers, we had extensions that did certain things, and then we put that functionality into the browser, and we seem to do the same thing with the environments now.
Yeah, I mean, it circles around the bigger. Are you Bun users, you two?
No,
I tried it. I'm hardly using Node, so basically, I tried it I did a few speed comparisons, but when it came out, but I'm not beholden to any of them really. Yeah,
I mean, I'm usually a traditional user, so I stick with NPM. I didn't switch to PNPM or Yarn or whatever is cool. And right now there's this kind of push of all these runtimes or server JavaScript tools to become everything, right? Bun is very much pushing into this direction. So it's a linter testing framework, a bundler, a whatever. Then there's Dino also bringing a lot of things in. So we're coming from this idea that we just had JavaScript and a gazillion small modules of NPM, and everybody got annoyed by it because every project was different. So we have now this bigger push into these full-fledged, complete things. I don't know. I still have to wrap my head around it, where we're going, because in my opinion, we have to draw the line at some point, right? Should it be the whole thing? I also know that Evan Vue from the Vue ecosystem now collected some VC money, right, to build the new perfect JavaScript tooling stack. I know that many people tried. We will see where we end up. I don't know yet.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. The amount of dependencies that people use, I think this is really nice because it actually would allow you to plow through your systems and first of all update Node, which is like a lot of people don't do enough. And then be like that. I guess you can delete a lot of code that you had in the past that was for some certain test framework or something like that. And deleting code is the most fun you can have as a developer, I think.
Yeah, I mean, in this post, there's a comparison at the end. It's just that fewer dependencies is better dependencies, right? And whoever runs npm install and gets 150, 200 megabytes for a hello world out there, so this table there, it's just 50 megabyte for a Hello World is ridiculous, right? But if you just use the stuff that is included in your runtime, use it, people. Update Node and use the stuff.
We made fun of the Visual Studio people, and we made fun of the Xcode people, and said like we're gonna in the JavaScript world be much more lightweight, and now we forgot about it.
Yeah, it's wild.
Cool. So the last thing we're going to cover, because the rest is basically covered, is something that I tried to invite that person here as well, but there's no email, so it's on X. He hasn't answered yet, so I don't know. A standards first framework called NUE, N-U-E, and Dan, you took a look at that, right?
Yeah. I think I'll be honest, I rolled my eyes when I first saw it because I thought, oh, do we need another framework? And then I looked a little bit more deeply, and I know when they say standards first, I thought, yeah, okay, it still just says to me another framework. I'm not sold. And then the more I read it, the more they make the case for, the problems that we've got today in terms of, there's a really good one about halfway down the article under the second header, the design engineering problem, where, for example, they show you a cryptic block of Tailwind classes, flex, item, center, shadow, large, P6, hover, BG, and that it doesn't scale up. It's a awful practice when it comes to design systems. I use Tailwind, and everybody tells me it scales up, and I still always find issues with it scaling up every single time. It gets messy, there's duplication, etc. So that's just one side that this framework is looking to kind of deal with, if you like. And I do think there's something interesting in there. My concern is that it's asking people to rethink how they're doing things at the moment, and maybe it's come too late, and that frameworks like something like Next, for example, Next.js, it's already got people thinking in certain ways, and they do change, over time. They've particularly changed when they brought in the app router, for example. So they do ask you to kind of adopt new mental models, but it feels like, at least for now, it would be a lot of work for somebody to pick up NUE as a framework, because they would have to rethink everything. And it's whether or not they really want to do that when we don't know if those new ways of thinking are actually going to be the way that we work moving forward. So it's just unfortunate. Great ideas. I just don't know if they're going to go anywhere at the moment, unfortunately.
What do you think, Dan? Is there space for another one that is standards-based, or is standards-based standards-based?
I mean, we have to figure out where we're going with that, right? There's also this divide right now that we're just shipping too much code to the client, and that is, in my opinion, just a fact. We're shipping JavaScript for no reason. We are rehydrating, doing client-side routing literally for no reason. It's just a matter on how quickly people will be punished for it, because marketing sites don't need a React stack like at all, right? I think there's right now a little bit of consideration there that Next React shouldn't be the default there. And I'm also the skeptic there of shipping more code as a default, which could potentially kind of bring or open up the development world for other choices. But right now, I think the market is still a little bit set on the defaults, and it's very hard to establish a new framework right now. So it was already 10 years ago. Now it's even harder. I don't know.
It's so bizarre when you look at the age of things. I mean, like React is like 12 years old or something like that now.
Yeah.
And, HTMX that we talked about last time that we still don't know what it is also 2 years old now, or something like that. So it's really like you forget about these things really fast. And I remember during Ajax times, there was like 125 different Ajax frameworks, and then jQuery was the only one left. And and it's interesting. One last bit like that. Okay, I'm on the other computer. That's the problem. That class name thing, that's another holy war that we keep having to talk about. Like, is like semantic class names, or is the name of the class unnecessary? Was the first discussion. And then later on, this to me looks like inline styles. And I don't understand why people do that. Am I old? Am I bad? Am I wrong?
It's similar to inline styles. It is, like, I can't lie. There's definitely drawbacks with it, though. It's not as you can't do some of the things you can do with inline styles. It's got this just-in-time engine, I believe, inside of Tailwind, but it's this idea that you should be able to pass in things dynamically, and it will render those as CSS classes. But it doesn't effectively if it's a partial class. So if you passed in BG and then a dynamic color, it wouldn't know what to do. You have to pass in BG dynamic color. So you end up having to do quite a lot of work just to get a dynamic class in, Whereas if you just did it with inline styles, you can just pass it in as it is. So yeah, it is, and you end up with a lot of duplication, because if you try and use that, for example, that flex kind of group of classes, you might try and use that somewhere else, but then, oh, now I need a different padding, and so you end up kind of constantly conflicting with yourself and having to override, and it's far from perfect, even though Tailwind fans will say that it's the way forward. I don't think it is. It's not finished yet.
What do you think?
I was very skeptical initially. I'm tailwinding now for a year. I would say this example is like inline styles, because it has this dynamic CSS generation that you just mentioned, Dan, right? The square brackets in there. They will just immediately spin up a new class that goes into this CSS sheet. Without it, it's just a bunch of tokens, right? They're not pretty. But if you're dealing with a component kind of driven architecture, and you kind of build your components the right way, I don't think it scales too bad, actually, right? Because it's enforcing you to put the things in a single place. Of course, if you're not componentizing, and if your model isn't that great, then you write this stuff 10 times and you will hate it, for sure, 1%. That said, I'm not a big fanboy, but I do like that I don't have to open a CSS file while working on a big app. That is actually nice. And I don't have to think about architecture and BEM and SMACs and how I can have CSS that I don't have to delete or add and just pile it on. So that is a big advantage for sure.
Cool. I can see there's a special coming. We should do something and compare them bit by bit and see what's going on there. But for now, I think this is a lunch break over, so you all have to go back to work and make sure that the bottom line of your company is making more money, and be just happy that you have a job. Because I mean, like, no, I'm kidding. Like, it's great to have you to having this show. I'm enjoying it. Hopefully, you did as well. Drop us a line, tell us about it if you want to. Don't subscribe and think, because we don't do that yet. I don't know why people keep asking for that. But yeah, Stefan, this was great. I guess we can do more of those, because I can always drag you in, because we're in the same time doing the same thing. Maybe we just get some food together next time. And that was wonderful. So thanks very much. And I hope to see you next time, next Wednesday. The recording will be out later on, and you can look it up if you want to as well. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Stefan.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks.